Good afternoon, Ames Chamber of Commerce members. My name is Drew Camp, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Business Development here at the Ames Chamber of Commerce, and we're excited to start once again, this time the 2019 legislative sessions version of my weekly legislative update, which we will do from now until hopefully the middle of April, when they're scheduled to adjourn the 2019 general session and the first session of the 88th General Assembly. Kind of jumping right into things, I want to first start off by highlighting the priorities of the Ames Chamber, and then I'll embed a few things as far as things that the governor talked about in her condition of the state and some of the other things that we're hearing about from some of the other business organizations and our partners in our lobbying efforts. As we look at the Ames Chamber of Commerce's 2019 legislative priorities, there's really 5 major tenets that we're going to make sure that we're monitoring. What those are is the economic development environment, workforce recruitment and expansion and retention, the property tax backfill and the protection of the property tax backfill, investment in transportation and infrastructure, and an extension of the secure and advanced vision for education or the school infrastructure sales tax penny. As I go into each of those different subsections, I'll start with the economic development environment. What we're really looking at in that regard is there's a lot of talk about some additional property tax reform to build off the reform that was done in 2013. The issue that we're kind of seeing right now is in the 2013 reform, there was a 90% rollback for business, industry, commercial, multifamily, residential, larger scale projects as far as property tax goes. But what we've now found is the rollback that they received then, that was a benefit to them as they move forward doing their business, is now we've now met that rollback, and we're actually in some cases above it. So we're looking at what can we do to try to remedy that situation and really make sure that our very large property taxpayers, being business and industry, commercial, and some of your large sector businesses in town, are making sure that they get a fair shake as far as property tax goes. So that's one thing that we're wanting to make sure that we're monitoring, but there's important contingencies with that as well. Because anytime you mention property tax, there's 2 things that we really care about with economic development that are tied along to that. One I already referenced is the property tax backfill. That's $152 million to the state of Iowa that they backfill to school districts, counties, and cities. That is hugely important to municipal finance and to just local jurisdictions. And as a matter of fact, just in Ames alone, between the Ames School District, Story County, and the city of Ames, it's just a hair under $3 million in taxable valuation and taxable local revenue, which is a huge deal if you phase that out over 3-5 years, or God forbid, take it away all at once. So that is something we will be watching very, very closely to make sure we are advocating against touching the property tax backfill at all. It was a promise that was made to those communities, and we're going to stand by our partners to make sure that we're advocating on their behalf to protect that very important funnel of revenue that comes to them each and every year. Another piece that we're looking at as far as is what we need to protect as well with property tax is tax increment financing. That's hugely important to what we do in the economic development industry, and it's one of the few local tools that we really have to set ourselves apart from others as we're trying to recruit large projects and grow local businesses. So those are 2 things that we're really going to be watching very closely as we have any conversations about property tax reform, but that is incredibly important to make sure that we have the full breadth of the issue if we are going to be discussing any reforms. As far as income tax reform goes, that's where our tax credits are really embedded. And what we're kind of advocating for, as well as most business groups, is that we don't touch that really or do any kind of income tax 2.0 until next session. The legislature and others with a vested interest in income tax credits and financial assistance tools, they're all going to be taking part in a commission of sorts to review tax credits after this legislative session, and then coming back in the 2020 session with recommendations. So we don't think it's very practical or logical to preempt that this session before they come back with their recommendations from that commission, that panel regarding tax credits. So we'll be advocating for that as well. But one thing that's also hugely important in the economic development environment is making sure that entities like the Iowa Economic Development Authority, Iowa Workforce Development, Iowa Department of Education, our K-12 education partners, Iowa State University, Des Moines Area Community College, and other institutions of higher education throughout the state are getting the resources they need. One of the biggest things we noted in the condition of the state address that the governor mentioned is full funding of the Regent universities, which is obviously hugely important to us here in Ames. We want to make sure that they're getting funded, but also all of our other economic development partners and community colleges and things along those lines to really make sure that we're addressing Iowa's workforce and economic and community development needs. As we move on to the workforce retention and recruitment, workforce and housing are really the two big issues that our employers are facing. So we're monitoring those very, very closely. But one of the other things we need to try to figure out is that our population has been relatively stagnant since the 2010 census. We've added only just a hair under 150,000 people to the state of Iowa, which is not a lot in terms of a census. So that's kind of concerning. So we're looking at ways we can possibly try to attract population and retain population in the state of Iowa, and our economic development and business partners have some innovative ideas on how that could possibly work that we'll talk about in later updates. Due to the high demand for the workforce housing tax credit, we're also advocating that that funding get doubled and it also get pulled out of the Iowa Economic Development Authority tax credit and made competitive and merit-based. That's something we know will have a major impact in the housing market and the housing industry throughout the state, and we want to make sure we're watching that and making sure that that's moving forward in the right direction. But we also want to make sure that there's sufficient funding for Future Ready Iowa, the Last Dollar Scholarship Program, and the Iowa Employer Innovation Fund, something that the governor pushed for in her condition of the state address. We stand with her and others who want to make sure that Future Ready Iowa is fully funded. One of the other top issues that I mentioned early on is the property tax backfill. I kind of already addressed that. That is something we're going to work closely with our partners at the city, the county, and our community school districts to make sure we're defending that and that that promised backfill and payment to those local entities is ensured, because like I said, it's about $3 million in local revenue. With regards to transportation and infrastructure, it's imperative that we build on the progress made last session in water quality. It's something that we need to do as a state. It's an issue that continues to come up, and it was a great first step with the governor's bill. That was the first that she signed as governor last year, but we want to continue to build on that and build the momentum, especially as we have the nutrient reduction strategy here in Ames, and we know the impact that that is having and the impact that supporting water quality will have on their operations as well. We also support investment in Iowa's roads and bridges, water and infrastructure, and energy and communications infrastructure that utilizes both long-term planning and examination of innovative funding models, but perhaps most importantly, can be paired with any federal policy changes that would be done for infrastructure. That is hugely important, that anything we're doing with infrastructure is going to be able to be side by side and run parallel to and match and be able to leverage any federal funds that may be appropriated if infrastructure policy reform is actually touched on at the federal level as well. The last major piece that we highlight in our priorities is Secure and Advanced Vision for Education, or SAVE, School Tax Infrastructure Penny. And the big deal with that is right now is it's set to expire in 2029. And the problem with that, obviously, is you're looking at doing 10-year bonds. You're now hitting that window at 2029, being in 2019. So we're hoping that the legislature, as they looked at doing last year, will actually be able to fulfill the extension and push it out until 2049, which would be a major, major win for school districts throughout the states who are doing large infrastructure projects. Think of what is happening up in Gilbert, and then obviously at Ames with the high school and the elementary schools as well. We want to make sure that they're getting the support they need to make sure that they have financially viable projects and are getting the shot in the arm and the support they need from the state legislature. Amongst those issues, those issues are our top priorities. There are several others that we will be monitoring and we'll touch on as we go into the session. It's still very, very quiet, as you can imagine, down in Des Moines. There's a lot of conversations happening. There's some bills being proposed, but a lot of stuff is totally in preliminary stages, so there's not a lot of detail that can be provided on some of these issues, but we expect that to grow in the coming weeks, and we'll make sure to bring you all the pertinent information that we know that you'll care about and want to learn more about in the weeks ahead, and we look forward to doing so. So thank you very much, and have a very nice weekend.